No additional comments? Okay, thank you so much. So at least I can see one question. It's Swana, our colleague. It's to Dr. Malik. Realistically speaking, do you see the Pakistan government offering any form of reparations to the Pashtun nation or setting in place mechanisms of transitional justice? But obviously, all of you can take that question. But Dr. Malik, it's specifically addressed to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the question, and Zubair Saab for the kind comments and your excellent presentation as well. While the Pakistani government, as it currently stands, is not capable of anything, they are not capable of, controlling Islamabad, and let alone offering reparations, because they are completely beholden to the de facto, not the de jure, but the de facto wielders of power in Pakistan, which is the military and its associated kind of agencies. So the Pakistani government, I don't see them taking any kind of radical step, simply because they're not a radical government. They don't come from a radical constituency. They come from very established traditional elites. They have their bases in in kind of urban middle class from Punjab, and also from some parts of Pakhtunkhwa, Karachi, and of course the main, they have also their bases in the institutions of the state, especially the military. So I don't think they can offer anything. What I do know, and of course Gullalai and Zubair Saab can shed much detailed light on this, is that Pashtun Tahrib movement has won a lot of gains for Pashtuns, and by its reverberations, it has raised consciousness in other oppressed groups as well. And what it has done is not been any charity from the government or from the state. It has done this on the basis simply of people's power, right? So anything which the Pashtun Tahrib movement achieves, whether it's relief over checkpoints, whether it's release on a limited scale of missing persons, which happened, I know, when it emerged. I don't know what is the situation now. Zubair Saab and Gullalai will know much better. Or any kind of the Watan card relief and so on and so forth has been on the basis of building what Zubair Saab has called, drawing on Rousseau, a collective will, a people's will. So any question of concessions from the government, and that is also a wider theoretical and a political point, which our colleagues, our comrades in the PTM, I think they understand very well, but it's good to reiterate, is that whatever they will get, whatever we will get, we will not get because of charity or because some opening of heart by the Pakistan government, by the Pakistan state. We will get that on the basis of the people's power and the collective will that people have been building while working through these particularities of space, geography, history, and so on. As far as mechanism of transitional justice, I'm not sure. I mean, look, the PTM has a very, I mean, in terms on the face of it, it has a very plain demands, right? Bring Rawan War to justice, release, or bring missing, not even release missing persons, bring them to court, not even release them. It's very simple demand. So these very simple demands themselves are giving, palpitations to the Pakistani ruling classes. And why they're giving palpitation is because of what Zubair Saab said, what Gullalai said, and what I said earlier, is that because PTM has attacked the very core of what basically holds the Pakistani ruling bloc together. And that core is basically its militarized core. And why it holds it together is related to how Pakistani state and civil society and economy has evolved historically, and that's a wider kind of question of political economy. But even very simple demands are construed as sedition. I mean, it's a strange situation where demanding constitutional rights becomes sedition. It's a very strange thing. I mean, usually sedition is what Musharraf did. General Musharraf did, is that when you subvert the constitution. Here, asking for demands to be fulfilled in terms of the constitution also is sedition. So the constitution itself is a seditious document, but even with all its problems, as Zubair Saab was pointing out, and as Manzoor Pashtun has also pointed out. So mechanism of transitional justice, I'm not sure. Whatever they will get, whatever they have gotten up till now, will be on the basis of people's power. Of course, having bases in parliament, having Mohsen Dawar in parliament, Ali Wazir in parliament, has its own value. But we must never forget that, the movement, they are in the parliament because of the movement. The movement is not there because they're in the parliament, right? Mm-hmm. And that is what Zubair Saab said, the building of the collective will, I think that should be the focus. And what the government does, what the state does, they will, whatever, I mean, this is not just Pakistan, whatever, all over the world, states, elites only give in under pressure, right? So when the collective will is built, then, we see some concessions. What concrete concession it has got, I've mentioned some, but Zubair Saab and Gulalai will be able to tell much better.
Can I make a comment
Sure.
on that? So basically, I'm not sure if the Pakistani state doesn't seem to be in the mood to pay any kind of reparation or have any kind of reconciliatory tone. We don't see that. But regardless of what the government does or the state does, PTM's demands are very clear. For example, PTM has one of the main demands of the PTM is the constitution of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And it has a long list of stuff that they want, basically holding the state to account for the past acts, like, why these jihadi wars were inflicted on our land, why the Takfiri Saudi money was brought in, why these people were turned in, why the otherwise very liberal and open and egalitarian culture of the Pashtuns was subjected to these these kinds of religious ideas to provide cannon fodder for jihad and all of the stuff, how much money was taken, how much destruction took place, account for the people who were killed, the destruction of the property that had happened, and things like that. There's a long list. If you're interested, I can share that with you. But at the end of that list, in a constitutional document that they are considering, on which there is a wide consensus amongst the PTM cadres, at the end of that list where it says that, we want Reconciliation Commission to do this, at the end it says that the PTM believes that no reconciliation between the state and Pashtuns is possible without first determining the truth about these issues outlined in the preceding paragraphs, so that those responsible for bringing death and destructions on Pashtuns and their lands are unmasked, obliged to publicly admit their guilt to the victims of these wars, and brought to justice. Such a process through an independent and truthful and powerful Truth and Reconciliation Commission is the only way to give closure to the Pashtuns who have suffered the brunt of state-sponsored jihadi wars. Full and honest disclosure of the truth, provision of adequate compensation for human and material loss, and guarantee that such acts will never be repeated again might possibly create incentives for Pashtuns to give indemnity to the perpetrators of crimes against them, and thus pave a way for reconciliation between the state and Pashtuns, leading to sustainable peace and political stability. Mm-hmm. So this is within the demand. So PTM basically has told the state that you have done this wrong to us, and in spite of that, we are ready to reconciliate. But the terms of reconciliations has also been laid down. So the ball is basically in the state's court, whether it wants to reconciliate or further deteriorate the relationship between the state and Pashtuns.
Mrs. Ismail, would you like to add anything to that question, or do you think?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the amazing presentations, Ayaz Malik and Dr. Zubair. It was a treat to listen to both of you. Coming to the question of first, so before I answer the question, I think I agree with Ayaz Malik that this government is neither capable nor it has the power to offer anything to anyone, because it is a puppet government. It is a creeping coup in Pakistan. Pakistan at this moment is not a free country. It is not a free state. It is completely in the control of Pakistan Army, and they are the one who are calling the shots on everything. Pakistan Army is the only department, or not even like sub-department, which is making all decisions. So there is, there is no government, and even the retired Pakistani generals who keep on appearing on Pakistan mainstream media and give political analysis, even they say that Pakistan Army is the biggest and the most popular political party in Pakistan. So if any political party is in power at this time, it's Pakistan Army it's Pakistan Army. And as we have said it, three of us have said it in our presentations already, that they have, like, the way Pakistan Army works, because it is an army, it has been trained to deal with enemies. It has not been trained to deal with citizens of a country. It does not have any training of politics. It does not have any training of dealing with movements. It has the only training it has is to deal with enemies. So it sees everyone as an enemy. Like, you know, there is this proverb that when you have a hammer in hand, everything you see, you think it's a nail, and you keep on kind of like pushing it. So the Pakistan Army at this moment is treating Pashtun Thafa's movement as an enemy. They treat it as an existential threat to Pakistan. And they are, and though despite of the fact that we have been demanding to criminalize enforced disappearances, what the military establishment did, that it attempted to legalize enforced disappearances under the garb of FATF legislation. Those who had followed Pakistan parliamentary debates would know that when FATF legislation was happening, there were attempts were made by PTI, the current government, which works on the behest of Pakistan Army. It tried to legislate, to give legal cover to enforced disappearances, and it has already given legal covering to surveillance of the citizens as well. So more, and the laws, as we said, that the laws have been criminalized against Pashtuns, weaponized against Pashtuns actors. Laws like anti-terrorism laws, sedition laws, cybercrime laws, 3MPO, maintenance of public order, all of these, they have been weaponized against Pashtun activists. So those who speak about their rights are treated as enemies. However, what has changed in the political environment of Pakistan is that for a long time, it was us at the peripheries of Pakistan who were treated who were treated like criminals for speaking against terrorism and for speaking about our rights. Now that the mainstream Pakistan is also especially the opposition political parties, when they are standing up to this current political government, they are now also being booked under the cybercrime laws of Pakistan, and under the sedition laws. The ex-Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, has been booked in a case of sedition. The current Prime Minister of Kashmir has been booked in a case of sedition. So it has, what was happening to us for the past 3 years of the emergence of PTM, it has now started happening to the mainstream politicians of Pakistan as well. And now people and media are speaking about the misuse of these laws, because the persecution is now becoming mainstream. And as our persecution has been so normalized that nothing happens to the mainstream and they don't speak about it. So unless and until, even for our to get any reparations, it will go in parallel with the democratic struggles of Pakistan. Because unless and until Pakistan Army is in the government, and until and unless they act as a political party in Pakistan, it will be very, very difficult even for Pashtuns or PTM for our grievances to be addressed. So the more there are movements in Pakistan for democracy, for civilian supremacy, for constitutional supremacy, the more there are movements to make this country a democratic country, the more space the more political space we will receive, and the lesser will be the persecution against us. I'm not saying that there will be no persecution against us, but at least I think that the persecution will be reduced and there will be more space for us to be heard.
Thank you so much. We have another question. It's what is the current level of cooperation between the PTM and the social movements of other minority groups? And if I can add a second part to this, what is the mode of interaction between PTM and the so-called terrorist groups, like particularly the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban? How are they, because normally PTM is equated as a terrorist organization by the Pakistani state. And PTM is complaining about Taliban attacking them. So what is going on there? Thank you. And anyone is welcome to take these two questions. Yeah, Gulalai, please go ahead.
Taliban are not independent bodies. Taliban are proxies of Pakistan army. Pakistan uses different state actors. Pakistan army is using the state machinery against us where it fits them, but then it also uses their proxies against us. So at one hand, in the more urban spaces, like Ayaz Malik pointed out towards the PTM is like this coming together of the urban and rural Pashtuns as well. So, in the more urban spaces, Pakistan is using state machinery like it will use FIA to book cybercrime cases, or or sedition cases are made. The police institution is like the police department is used against citizens, and then in the more rural or in the tribal setup, Taliban are used against PTM activists. They are not independent, they are proxies of Pakistan army, and they extend the policy of Pakistan army. Arif Wazir, for example, Arif Wazir was killed by the non-state actors, by most probably by the Taliban, by the unknown in the tribal areas. But in Balochistan, the Arman Ludi, he was killed by police. In Karachi, Pashtuns are killed by police officers. So, it really depends that which actor suits Pakistan army in whatever area. So they use it as per their own convenience. We have also witnessed that how religious organizations, the extremist fundamentalist organizations, were used to promote certain kind of narratives against activists. Like, for example, look at me and the propaganda that is run against me on social media. I'm, like there will be, I'm LGBTQ, I'm bashed for being LGBTQ supporter, for being non-religious and stuff like that. So, whatever fits Pakistan army, they use those tools against us. We are very clear, and I think that PTM in the current political context, if there is anyone, they are saying it very clearly that Pakistan is once again organizing Taliban organization. They are once again reorganizing Taliban organization in the western provinces of Pakhtunkhwa, because they are, since US has said that it is leaving Afghanistan, so it is preparing for these proxies to use them once again in Afghanistan for having more political and economic influence in Afghanistan for their own, for the strategic depth policies. So we see, for us, Taliban, Pakistan army, they are same thing.
Okay, would you like to also address the second part of the question, which is what is the current level of cooperation between social movements of other minority groups?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we have historically the oppressed nations of Pakistan. They have come together again and again. They have built alliances. They have worked together against for their rights. And even now we have a relationship of solidarity with Baloch. We have a relationship of solidarity with Sindhis as well. And very recently, actually, on the International Day of Enforced Disappearances, both in Canada and in the US, the diaspora community of Sindhis, Baloch, and Pashtuns came together and came together on the one-point agenda of enforced disappearances and protested against the. And one of the interesting things that happened in our protest is that we all came up like, we as activists, we keep on saying that thousands of people are missing, but in these protests, what we did was that we took out the data of Pakistan government, the commission's data on enforced disappearances, and we say, okay, we leave whatever we say, but this is the list that you have provided on your own website, and you are saying that you accept that these I think it's like maybe 8,000 or something, that this is the list of missing persons. So at least release these people or represent them in the court. And what happened the next day? Pakistan removed the list of missing persons from the website of enforced disappearances. So our alliance, what does it speak to us is that our alliances, our coming together, our advocacy does have an impact on them, and that's why they use all these creepy tactics.
Just to add to what Gulale already explained, I will say that, one benefit, the mobilization that PTM has done is that it has across the world, wherever Pashtun diaspora was there, PTM has brought them together. And so the international space is within within that, you can do that, PTM joining hands with the other social movements, like, and Gulale is leading that effort. But within Pakistan, it is very difficult. For example, I'll give you the example of once Manzoor tried to go to Balochistan to meet with Mama Qadir, who has his camp established for the Baloch missing persons for quite a few years now, to go there and to try to show solidarity with them. And the Pakistan immediately, the Pakistan Army has basically banned all the top leadership of PTM to go into Balochistan. And Malik has already referenced in his paper how PTM leadership once went to show solidarity with the Sindhis, but I think there were certain consequences for those Sindhi students after that. So it is extremely difficult. I mean, the Pakistan Army and the state is doing everything possible to prevent these solidarities between the movements. That is the question. Now, coming to your point that you raised, that the Pakistan Army accuses PTM of being terrorist organization. Well, the Pakistan Army has accused Gulale, her father, and even her mother as the terror financer, as having financed the gruesome attacks or certain suicide bombings
and sorry to cut you, but not just financed. They have accused us of direct involvement of like buying weapons and guns and vehicles for those terrorist attacks.
And one of those attacks that involved a church in Peshawar. When that happened, basically at that time, Gulale was in New York outside the UN protesting against that. And she's today accused of having financed that and having abetted that. But the PTMs, I mean, again, referring to the constitution of the PTM that is being considered, here they clearly say that, basically asking the government in the Truth and Reconciliation, certain question that they have set for the Truth and Reconciliation, one of the top question is this, that who decided and started the jihadi wars on Pashtun lands across the Durand line and decided for that matter to turn the erstwhile tribal areas, Swat, Malakand, and Janubi Pashtunkhwa into the strategic backyard of Pakistan. So basically, this is the first question that they want to put before the Truth and Reconciliation, if and when it is constituted. At another places in the secondary objectives in the Constitution, they lay down that the Pakistan government must, this is again the first point, must desist from using terrorists as instruments of foreign and domestic policy. And for that matter, treating Pashtun belt as strategic backyard of Pakistan and using Pashtuns as cannon fodder for rent-seeking jihadi wars to fuel Pakistan's war-based economy. So PTMs, I mean, this is the top demand of the PTM, that why the state is using jihadis and these terrorist groups for achieving its objectives, and for that matter, using the Pashtun lands. So basically, PTM is clearly against this jihadi project of the Pakistan, and of course, the instruments of jihadi policy that they're using. And even today, again, as Gulale mentioned in her initial presentation, there is another wave of, given what is happening in Doha, there is another wave of target killing that is going on. They are targeting every person in the tribal areas. These terrorist groups again have emerged from somewhere. I mean, it is very astonishing how they could come from nowhere, despite the fact that every hilltop, every entry and exit to these tribal areas are occupied by the Pakistan Army. They have got their, I mean, you cannot have a simple knife. You cannot take it inside the tribal areas. And then all of a sudden, these people come in who have IEDs. So basically, I concur with what Gulale said, that, these terrorist groups are the instruments of Pakistan's foreign policy, especially towards Afghanistan. And PTM has been the victim. PTM is the voice for the victims of that policy, let alone being the sympathizers of terrorism.
Thank you. Dr. Malik, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, look, I agree with Gulalai and Zubair Saab, Dr. Saab, Dr. Zubair, in terms of that the PTM's top leadership, of course, they are very afraid. They are mortally afraid almost, of them kind of interacting with other, oppressed groups in Pakistan. But if we look a level, a couple of tiers below, at the everyday level of organization and the social basis of PTM, right? And the social basis of PTM, as Gulalai has talked about, is among young, educated Pashtuns, just ordinary people who've been often displaced and have faced the brunt of this kind of violence and discrimination in urban areas of Pakistan. And at that everyday level, of course, there is always interaction. I mean, that's the unique thing about urban spaces, right? That you meet different kinds of people and you discover commonality and differences between them.
Now, and the cyberspace as well, cyberspace as well.
And of course, cyberspace, absolutely. You're absolutely right, on cyberspace as well. Now, this everyday level of interaction is very interesting for me as a social scientist and of course, as a political worker. Because if you look at, for example, when the PTM arose initially, Jalila Haider from the Hazara community, Hazara Shia community of Quetta, she went on a hunger strike against same proxy use of fundamentalist groups. And the people who were supporting, and Quetta, as you know, is not a Baloch city, it's mostly a Pashtun city, right? It's at the edge of the Pashtun belt in northern Pashtunkhwa, southern Pashtunkhwa, northern Balochistan. And a lot of the people who were supporting her strike at that time were PTM cadres in Quetta, right? And I know this because I was there in Pakistan at the time, and I knew quite a few people there. Similarly, just recently there was a strike, a protest camp by Pashtun students in Lahore, Punjab University, against the decrease in quota for students from peripheral areas in Punjab University, and that was a joint strike of Pashtun students and Baloch students, and they eventually won their demands, and a day or so ago, as far as I remember. Now, this is actually the social base, the everyday social interaction from which the PTM has emerged, right? And which has also inspired other movements, right? So this everyday solidarity, but in Baloch areas, you have the example of the big protest which happened recently after that small kid, what was her name, Bramsh Baloch. She was injured by one of the so-called death squads, right? Proxy groups as well, right? Similarly, a year or so ago, 2 years ago, in Sindh, there was a killing of a Pashtun laborer or a Sindhi laborer by a Pashtun Maulvi, or other way around, something of the sort, Irshad Ranjani case. And there was a great fear that in other parts of Sindh, not Karachi, other parts of Sindh, this ethnic conflict would start again between Sindhi and Pashtun and others. And at that time, Pashtun intelligentsia and Sindhi intelligentsia took a great step. They did joint rallies, and they said, look, what happened was this was an individual dispute between this Maulvi or whoever, or some local notable and the Pashtun laborer, and we will not let this divide Sindhi and Pashtun in the spaces of Sindh, which as those of you who don't know, urban Sindh has a very toxic history of ethnic conflict, and this thing can quickly escalate in context of Karachi, Hyderabad, and so on, and this was not allowed to happen. So there's an everyday level of consciousness, of interaction, of solidarity, if you want to, for lack of a better word, cosmopolitanism, of meeting and recognizing commonality and difference, which might not be, okay, PTM joins with Sindhis, but everyday level of Pashtun young people, joining with, Hazaras and Sindhis and so on. So this is where I think the hope is, because this is also the milieu from which PTM arose. Right? So this is where the hope is of solidarity. Now, I can give you one more concrete example of this as to how the state or the ruling classes are very afraid of this kind of thing. When PTM came to, and this is, I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but I will mention this. When PTM came to Karachi in 2018, May 2018, and I was in Karachi at the time, some of my students were also involved in the mobilization and so on and so forth. The initial location of the Jalsa in Karachi was the park across from the Quaid-e-Azam Mausoleum, which is in the center of the city. So those of you who know the geography of Karachi, Karachi's central area has historically been, more of a Muhajir or Urdu speaking area, and Karachi's peripheral areas, so places like Malir or site and so on, Malays, are mostly kind of, ethnic, other ethnic groups, non-Urdu speaking groups, right? Sindhis, Baloch, Pashtun, and so on. And that is just how migration patterns and urban planning and housing has worked in Karachi. Now, having the Jalsa, PTM Jalsa in Al-Azhar Mazar, this very center of the city, that's also the place where the Muharram Julus takes place, would have been a very different symbolism to the PTM Jalsa, right? Because that is a place which is next to Gujarati Abadi, Shia Abadi, Shia population, Gujarati population, Mahajir population, and of course Pashtun population, and in the center of the business district in Karachi. What the city authorities, or the real authorities did, is that they until the last day, they did not give NOC of Jalsa in that space, in that location. And on the last night, they gave, the night before the Jalsa, on 12th May night, 13th was the Jalsa, they gave NOC to hold the Jalsa in Sorab Got, which is a Pashtun Afghan Abadi. Now, this is very interesting. The struggle over space is very interesting, because the symbolism of a Jalsa in the heart of Karachi is very different from the symbolism of the Jalsa in Sorab Got. When it happened in Sorab Got, it is automatically registered, oh, this is a Pashtun thing, right? Mm-hmm. This is simply a Pashtun thing confined to Pashtuns. A symbolism of that Jalsa, if it had happened in the Al-Azhar Mazar ground across it, would have been, okay, this is a thing which brings people in Karachi together, bring different people in Karachi together, basing itself in Pashtun, but also having this quest towards universality or unity. Now, this kind of struggle, this is what I'm seeing, the everyday level of both attempts to form unity and cooperation, and the thwarting of those attempts from the top. And I think, of course, it's important as to what Manzoor is doing or what Mohsen Dawar is doing, Ali Wazir is doing. But I think our focus should be on this everyday level of interactions and these kind of, very molecular level of contestations which take place, which tell us, I think, much more about the social basis and what is, the milieu from all of where these things emerge, right? If you see what I mean. So this is where I will stop.
Yes, thank you. Afghanistan features, and it's mentioned again and again in this discussion. There is a question about the Afghan peace process, but for now, I'll just archive that. I'll come to this question of inclusivity and especially participation of women in PTM. And Mrs. Ismail, you mentioned this, but if you could talk more about it, because if you see the antithesis of PTM, the Taliban, they're exclusively middle-aged men, especially in their leadership. So how come PTM, as you said, as considered coming from this conservative region of the country, has such strong participation of women, and especially in leadership, the people like yourself, Rangaludi, and Sanaa Ijaz, and so on and so forth. So if you could talk about the dynamics there a little bit.
So yeah, as I said, that despite of the fact that the way Pashtun identity has been shaped because of the militarization and enforced retribalization, it has made it very difficult terrain for women. But the kind of political exposure which PTM has given to the young people, it has reshaped Pashtun identity, and it is reshaping Pashtun identity, making it a very democratized identity. And I think that one of the reason is that because the whole kind of, like the philosophy of PTM is that they're asking for rights, they're asking for human rights. And I think that it gives you this consciousness and awareness that when you ask for your rights, you become more aware of not becoming perpetrators of human rights abuses towards other people, towards other ethnicities, and towards people within your own community. So I think it's the whole the philosophy of PTM in itself, which and the political exposure which has transformed, which is transforming Pashtun identity, and it is very open from day one. I remember that I will share this. I have shared this story. I will share it once again. That when it was still Pashtun Long March to Islamabad and has not yet come up with this Pashtun Tahfuz movement name, in Islamabad it was initially when it started, like these were all these mostly men, and then there were these few women from Islamabad who belonged to like Ismat Shah Jahan, Tuba from Awami Worker Party, Bushra Gohar, Sanna Ijaz. They would come and show their solidarity with the movement. They would sit there. And then one day I also went with some of my friends to the to show my solidarity. And while some of the women, while we were sitting there, and we were kind of discussing that, this is such an amazing revolutionary movement, and we as women activists, like some of us who had been at the forefront of human rights movement and democracy, we were like that this is our responsibility to bring in more women to the movement, and to make sure that this is not just men's movement, this is also women's movement. So it was Feb 2018 that we women who were already active as part of civil society, as part of political parties, we started working on making a plan, and we decided that 8th Feb 2018, like 8th Feb will be the day of women. We started mobilizing women. We started reaching out to women from like women who were lawyers, women who were nurses, teachers, women who were domestic workers, who were housewives. We started reaching out to them and started talking to them about this amazing march happening in Islamabad, and why it is our cause as well. As a woman, it is our cause as well to stand for peace. So we had declared this 8th Feb as a day for women in the movement. And on that day, we were expecting that maybe, like 50, 60 women would would kind of like come after all that mobilization. But I remember that when the day came, there were around 400 women who came and joined the movement. And while we were organizing this whole thing, and we were in touch with the organizers, I remember that it was like Manzoor Pashtun, Mustafa Pashtun, all these young guys who were then at the lead, they told us very clearly that if women are coming to the movement, then their space is not to be in the audience. If women are coming, they will be on the stage. They will be on the forefront of the movement. On 8th Feb, the stage was given to women. It was, we stood on the stage. We were moderating the whole kind of like, the whole thing. Women speakers from all fields of life and political parties, they came, they showed their solidarity. I saw one of the picture on the Ayaz presentation was Samina Afridi's picture. She was speaking. She was one of the speakers who spoke on that day. There was this amazing woman. Her name is Aisha Bibi, she did such a powerful speech. I remember that when she ended her speech, and she ended her speech, like the crowd was shouting, more Bibi, we want her back. They were shouting that bring back more Bibi for a speech to us. So, and I think the way I see PTM, because the way I had seen it before 8th Feb 2018, I had seen it post 8th Feb 2018. And I think that was the day it opened up for women forever. And like there was no going back. We had seen from that day on that women were not just in the leadership, that women were coming as a participants. And initially, how spaces open up for women. It has to it has to open up from women who are like already say empowered, who are already in public spaces. We have to go and we created spaces for women. We guard those spaces for women, and it was us creating those spaces, guarding their spaces, that it enabled other women to come and join the movement. So while in Peshawar, in Islamabad Long March, you see women who are already in political and public spaces in civil society joining the movement. But then in Peshawar Jalsa, it changed. Women whose family members were missing persons, women who had never been in public spaces, they also started joining the movement. So that's how gradually it opened up to women. And and because of women's presence, I think that it is because of women's presence in the movement that it is becoming more democratic, and it is becoming more progressive movement. So I think that I would give this credit to all of those amazing Pashtun women who, despite of knowing that it is risky, despite of knowing that it is difficult, that they will have to pay a price for it, such as Waranga Luri, who lost her brother all of these women, they, despite knowing that what it would cost to them and their families, they decided to stand with the movement, and they owned it as their cause. Because of course, we're also Pashtuns are living on this land. So anything which is happening on this land, it is our cause. So it is women standing with the movement has made it more kind of like progressive and has opened the spaces for women who would not otherwise be able to come in public spaces. And now we have seen that while that yesterday or maybe like 2 days ago, there was even a protest in Waziristan where women came out in protest because as per the collective punishment strategy of the security forces, almost all men of the village were taken away, were abducted by the army, the gold was stolen. Some of the people were then returned to the families, but some people were still missing. So it was like women who came out on the streets and they were protesting for the return of their loved ones. So that's, I think.
Thank you so much. I'll take this one last. Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
just
Dr.
a very,
Zahra,
very quick comment, just 10 seconds. I mean, I just showed to you a picture. That is a picture taken from the Miran Shah. It is North Waziristan, and is one of the huge rallies that happened. And this is one of the women leaders, Sanai Jaz, who is addressing this crowd. Now, since I come from South Waziristan, it's very close to my village. It's unimaginable for a woman to stand in front of these people. I mean, it was at least unimaginable before the birth of the PTM. And in addition to that, the PTM's constitution has at so many places laid this down that the women's participation is extremely important. At least 50% of the representation of the women in different bodies has to be ensured. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll take this one last question, and then I'll have you all panelists have your last concluding remarks. So the question is to you, Dr. Zubair. It says Afghan peace process and Pakistan control over the Taliban. So in the light of this, what challenges could PTM face in the upcoming months?
Well, PTM is clearly against the Pakistan's army's strategic depth policy, which seeks depth into Afghanistan. And of course, PTM the army supports the Taliban's, the Afghan Taliban's, and putting its weight behind it. And PTM basically is representative of the people who have been the victims of this policy. So I see that PTM leadership, I don't want to paint a big picture, but like, for example, PTM in its demands says that the Pakistan army should stop creating, training, harboring, sponsoring the terrorist organization for destabilization of Afghanistan and shedding the Afghan blood on both sides of the Durand line, and to accept and respect the sovereignty of Afghanistan, abandon its notorious policy of seeking strategic depth in Afghanistan, follow the international diplomatic norms of non-intervention, and establish peaceful and brotherly relationship with Afghanistan and other neighboring countries. Now, this is clearly against the Pakistan's policy. And Arman Looney, who was killed, was basically at that time because the Pakistan army was seeing that Americans are exiting Afghanistan and Taliban's will be a formidable force to reckon with. So they were kind of realigning, its forces. And in that overall policy, what they started doing, the Pakistan army, what they started doing in the Pashtun areas of Balochistan, what they had done in the tribal areas a decade ago. So when they tried to dismantle the semi-government authorities like levies, when they were attacked, people like Arman Looney was basically one of those people who basically stood against that, and he started spreading information, and he started saying that, oh, this is gonna the same thing is they are doing in Balochistan, what they had done in the tribal areas of Pakistan. So the moment he said that, the next day he was killed. So anybody, whether it is PTM or anybody else, well, it's only the PTM at the moment who stands up to the Pakistan's adventurism in Afghanistan. will be the target of Pakistani force. So it depends on how PTM is successful in mobilizing the people to such an extent that it becomes difficult for the Pakistan army to attack its leadership.